Just how much can shaft flex, weight and kick point affect your driver performance? Today I'm going to be testing out loads of different KBS shafts to show you how getting the more optimal shaft can improve your driver performance. I've actually been hitting this driver really well recently, so it's going to be interesting to see if we can get a combo today that performs better than this option. Obviously I kind of know my rough stock yardages with this. It is October in England and a bit on the cold side now, so probably going to be a little bit slower today. So that first shot was at 90 clubhead speed, 133 ball speed, 218 carry, 23 spin, 83 height. So pretty optimal in terms of numbers, to be honest, other than the fact that I'm wearing a few jumpers and it's a little bit cold. So in terms of numbers, you might be wondering what you should be looking for if you're going for a fit-in, be that for a shaft or a club head. And obviously that's going to vary from person to person, depending on kind of your impact location and also what your club head speed is. And for me, in terms of speed, I'm kind of looking for a driver that can get me into the 140s in terms of ball speed, probably on the low end of that or the high 130s. Obviously it's freezing cold today, so 138, I'll definitely take that in winter. In terms of spin, I'm kind of looking at something in the mid to low 2000s. I personally don't like something that drops a lot lower than 2000 because I think you're just running the risk of getting really low spin on a missed strike. Obviously, if you're someone who swings it a lot faster, you can kind of get away with the spin being slightly lower. And then in terms of carry, I'm looking for something that's going like 220s up to 235s, 240s, depending on how optimal I am that day. So that's gone 220. It's literally freezing today, so I will definitely take that. 1.5 smash, so that was really efficient in terms of what I put in and what came out of the club. So in terms of kind of looking for numbers, I would definitely recommend looking at smash factor with driver. 1.5 is really efficient, and you're looking at everything between 1.45 and 1.5 as giving you really efficient distance for what speed you're putting into the ball. But I think overall, rather than focusing on really specific numbers, you should probably be looking at what shaft is giving you the most consistency. And obviously it's really great having loads of numbers, but you've always got to look at the ball flight and see if you're happy with that. Another big thing is height. You want to have a stiffness and flex that gives you a consistent height, but also gives you enough height on your shots. I would always say, you should kind of be going lighter or less stiff when the ball flight's getting too low, because ultimately if you can't get enough height on your shots, that's where you're going to lose out in terms of carry, because the ball's just not going to stay in the air long enough. And I think that's where the max HL option that we're going to look at in a minute will be really helpful for a lot of golfers who struggle to keep the ball in the air for long enough. I'm really pleased with those numbers in winter. If I carried it 220 every time over winter, I'd be like, yep, that's good work. Another thing you want to be really cautious of when kind of fitting or testing product is having consistent variables. So you can see here I've got a towel out, I'm drying my golf balls. That might seem a bit excessive, but that having water on the golf ball could really affect the data here. So if I'm really wanting to dial into like the spin, the fly, making sure everything's consistent and seeing what club's performing better, I need to have consistent testing parameters. Okay, I think I've got a group of good shots there which kind of consistently represent how I generally hit this club. So let's move into the max HL now and see what the switching performance is like. So I'm very excited to try this product because I think a lot of times when you go for fittings or you read up about new technology, loads of the maybe new and more exciting products are typically about giving you more distance and maybe reducing spin. And I think that's targeted to a lot of people in the market who are maybe really fast clubhead speed players. Obviously, these manufacturers design stuff for people to use out on tour as well, and they're very fast swing players. But personally, I obviously sit in that kind of low to mid 90s category. And actually, I don't always generate enough spin. And recently I've changed my swing a little bit and I definitely don't always get enough height. So with this driver, it's actually 9 degrees, but I've lofted it up to 10.5 using the hosel. But I would still say, if anything, the ball flight's coming out a little bit low. So I'm really interested to see if I can increase my height with this, because I do think that would give me more distance. And also I'm not really scared of having more spin either. I think people can get really scared of high spin, but actually spin can be a friend and kind of help you hold the ball on line more. The only time I can get too much spin is if I leave the face open, but I mean, if that happens anyway, it's going to go high, right? So I need something that gives me like more spin and more height on my good shots. There's definitely a couple there which I felt like I hit really nicely, but they came out in the like 60 feet in terms of height. And that's just not really high enough to get like the maximum out of the shot. Feels really stable for something that you're looking at that's saying like max HL on it. I think when you see something like that, it feels like it's designed at maybe like a game improvement market. Obviously we see a lot of clubs that may be called like max HL and is designed for a lot higher launch and more forgiveness, but this really feels like a player's shaft. So this is the nearest in terms of spec I could get to mine. It's a 52 stiff, so it's 2 grams heavier, but the same flex. Now it's quite interesting we talk about flex and people talk about regular, stiff, extra stiff, but actually there's no regulation on what a stiff shaft is. So if you pick up a shaft from KBS and then pick up a shaft from another manufacturer, they're not guaranteed to be the same thing in terms of stiffness. So I'd really avoid thinking, oh well, in my last drive I had a 60 gram stiff, so I'm going to get a 60 gram stiff. It's definitely worth testing different options out because they're not always like for like. It's a bit different to something like loft where if a clubhead says it's a 9, another one will also be a 9. This is slightly different. Expecting high bombs. That has gone so much higher. I mean, I pushed it, but it has come out so much higher. That was such a better ball flight. 104 feet, oh my gosh. So I actually went out to see KBS in California a couple of years ago, and it was quite interesting because I think when you go for a fitting, you don't always know what numbers you should be looking at from the screen. And the fitter told me there's a ratio between your ball speed and your club head speed, which tells you how high you should hit your shots. And for me, he was like, you should be trying to hit all your clubs throughout your bag at 100 feet. Which I was doing quite well, and then I made some swing changes and it's definitely dropped down. That was 104.6 feet. If we go back and look at the averages that I had with my previous shaft, I averaged 75.7 feet. That's just given me 25 extra feet of height without any swing change. Now obviously I did push it to the right a little bit, so that will probably give me a little extra height, but that's pretty mad. The spin also did jump up. That was 3.3, which is probably a tad excessive, but that is because I pushed it. So if I could just try to put a square face on this, that would help everything, wouldn't it? It feels super stable. I really like that. Much straighter, 99.7 feet. Probably where I'd want it to be. Spin 3000, carry 214 was a slight little toe strike. See if we can get a middle one. It's a real hard thing about like shaft and club testing because the numbers can change so much just based on where you strike it. And we're not all robots, so it's quite hard to strike it exactly the same every time. That was really nice. I can't believe how much more height that's given me straight off the bat. I do wonder though if it's giving me a tad too much spin. When we're looking at numbers like this though, it's always important to like reflect on how you pick what kind of club head and shaft you're using. So I think some people will very much have the mindset that once they've picked a shaft, they want to kind of use that all the time. And what they don't realise is when you move from like club head to club head as people bring out new driver generations, that each club head isn't kind of equal. So obviously when they do tech changes, they'll move the weight around in the head. That can affect how the ball launches, how the ball spins. And then that might mean that you need to pair a different shaft with that club head to get the right numbers. So for me here, I'm looking and thinking, this is launching really high. It's getting me up to like 100 feet. The spin's now a little bit too high. Could I maybe loft this back down to near the 9.5, bring the spin down a little bit? And yes, it might bring my height down a little bit, but it's still going to keep me like in the 90s, which is way better than what I was previously. So what I'm basically saying is that I'd never rule one club head or one shaft out because one number's wrong. It's always a balance of different things. I actually love that ball flight. It's nice to see the ball fly high again. That did spin at 4,000 though. That is a lot of spin. So what I'm going to do now is swap into the same shaft, but we're going to go down to the regular and see how that affects the numbers. So what I tend to find for me is if we're looking at kind of the weight of the shaft, so if you're going kind of 60, 50, 70, 40, etc., that kind of affects like the launch of the ball for me more, and the spin. Generally, the flex seems to affect if I hit it left or right more. So I suspect that I might see this go a little bit more left because it's regular and now it's just going to release more. But let's see if that's the case or not. This actually feels really stable. Say it's a regular shaft. At least I called it. Just straight away you can see how that went much further left. So it's allowing me to release the club head a lot more. Now for some people that might be great. For me, I have a left ball in me, so it doesn't necessarily suit my shot shape. I would say though, if you're someone who loses the ball to the right a lot, I do find if I get a shaft that's too stiff, the ball leaks off to the right a lot. So if you're struggling with that, you want something that can kind of straighten you out, release the club head a little bit more, it's definitely worth looking into a softer flex shaft. Interestingly, the height's dropped down a bit there. I wonder if it's just because I shut the face down more through the ball. Decent carry though. 219.7. Take that. Oh. I would say it's pretty crazy that this is the same club head, set up the same on the hosel, the same weight of shaft, the same type of shaft. All we've gone is from stiff to regular. And my ball flight has literally moved 60 yards left from when I was using the stiff shaft. So it just goes to show you how much like such a small variable can affect like your ball flight. And it's why I would never recommend you just walking into a shop and picking a driver off the rack and saying, oh, I used 50 stiff or I used 50 reg, because every shaft performs so differently. That one's actually really nice. 2.9 spin batad high, but 2.15 carry, 85 feet height, off a 90 club head speed, 134 ball speed. It's quite interesting because I've been for a lot of fittings and the fitter will always say, if you've hit 2 or 3 bad shots, the club's coming off you, because once you get past that point, you're kind of teaching yourself how to hit the right shot. Maybe you're swinging it a little bit different, presenting the club different, because obviously after I've hit 2 shots left, I'm just trying not to hit another ball left. So I would say if you kind of hit a couple shots straight off the bat and the shaft or the club doesn't perform for you, it's probably not the right option. And then just kind of after that, if you want to hit more, just consciously think about if you're trying to change something or not, because you don't want to be changing your swing to try and hit the club correctly. You want to be picking the club that works right for your swing. Okay, last up, we're going to swap into the 45 stiff. I'm really excited to test this because I feel like there is a kind of growing movement of people moving to lighter shafts. Even if you're looking like kind of the long drive thing where people can swing it super fast, they're moving to lighter shafts because they know they can swing them even faster. And I feel like I'm at a point where like I would have to do quite a lot of work to massively increase my club head speed. So this is probably maybe the best way for me to get more speed out of my driver without having to change my swing loads or do loads of gym work. So it's going to be interesting to see, 1, if they give me more speed, and 2, if that kind of affects my efficiency or not, if I can get more distance out of it, how it affects the other numbers. Oh, that was nice. Dead straight down the middle. 91.5 club speed, not excessively faster, but that is actually my longest carry of the day so far. 223.7 yards, 2.481 spin, 85 height. Whew, I like those numbers. I like those numbers a lot. This could very quickly become a how fast can I swing the club with this? It really doesn't feel excessively light though, that I like. 92.2 club head speed, 216 carry though, not quite as good a strike. I actually really like how consistent I'm hitting this. I feel like my height's a lot more consistent than the previous options. That feels like it's gone miles. 224. 224.6. It's gave me like 5 yards on my current shaft. And interestingly, I wouldn't say the club head speed's massively up, maybe like 1 mile an hour more. Obviously it's only 5 grams lighter, but it is giving me like 10 to 15 feet more height. This kind of flicks back to what I said at the start of the session. If you're not getting the optimal height on your shots, you're not going to get the maximum carry distance out of them. Clearly, currently, my shaft head combination is not quite giving me enough height to get the maximum distance out of my shots. And actually, this shaft's allowing me to launch the ball a little bit higher, and it's becoming a lot more efficient in terms of the numbers. Just set my Trackman back up because my iPod just died. It apparently likes the cold weather even less than I do. I really like that ball fly. I really like the fact it's just giving me a bit extra height and definitely keeping the spin up there. And what I like is I feel like it's giving me a consistent shot shape. I actually feel like it's straightened my flight out a little bit. I definitely felt a little bit right-sided before. That's carried 221 off 90 club head speed, spin rate just over 2,000 with a height of 81. Feels more powerful, even if it's maybe only giving me a few extra yards. So it's pretty interesting if we look at all the data here, because actually if we look from kind of front to back dispersion, shaft to shaft, it doesn't vary massively in terms of like my longest versus my shortest shot. I'd say the worst probably here is actually the regular driver, which is interesting and kind of shows you why that's probably not what I use, because it's most inconsistent for me. In terms of left to right, there's actually quite a big variance. So definitely the regular shaft was the one that I hit the furthest left, and then the max HL in the 52 stiff was actually the one I hit furthest right. Now sometimes with shaft it's not about like the number or the stiffness, it can be about like where the flex kind of kicks in that shaft. And that just kind of makes you present the club differently, and that's why you can end up with different shot shapes when you're testing different shafts out. So I think that's why it's really important to hit lots of different ones and see which one starts in like the best window for you. Probably the variable that changed the most throughout the testing here was spin. So let's just run through each model now, what the numbers were, if I kind of think that was right for me or not, or who I might think that shaft would suit. So first let's go with the TD50 stiff, which is what I started with. So with this, my average club head speed was 91.2. That was giving me 135 ball speed on average, 2,500 spin, 216 carry for 241 total. Now the height on this was 76, which is probably the one number I'm looking at to try and improve, and the smack show was 1.48. Obviously, you've seen in my other videos, I can hit it further than this, but it is literally freezing today. So all in all, I was pretty happy with those numbers, like the spins where I'd want it. Obviously, I could get more ball speed and carry when it's a little bit warmer. The height is where I would probably want to push it up a little bit. So if we move straight into the HL model, which is like the equivalent with a 52 stiff, what was most interesting here is kind of how much the spin jumped up. It jumped up to 3,362, so that was a massive increase. For me, I did see the shots move a little bit to the right, so some of it could be to do with that. The carry wasn't massively different, 212 yards, so down 4 yards. The ball speed was down 2, but also my club head speed was down like half a mile an hour. But like the notable thing here was how much the height jumped up. So on average, this was 98 feet, which was 22 feet higher. So I think probably for me, what we're seeing here is today I'm not producing quite enough ball speed for it to launch that high. So it's probably a tad too high for me right now. But actually, if you're someone who really needs extra height, I would definitely recommend this shaft because it's just going to give you a massive boost in terms of height. So as we see here, it's not about the extremes. It's not about hitting it really low or really high. It's about finding the right height that matches in with the rest of your variables to give you like the right overall shot. Okay, then we moved into the reg. This, I still had 90.8 club head speed. You might think that the club head speed would have jumped up because it was regular, but actually it didn't. 133.4 ball speed, 2,362 spin, which is pretty good to be honest, 212.5 carry distance. This one said it was 77 feet high, but I feel like that's a little bit inaccurate because I had one that I pulled quite a lot that went 53 feet. So if we took that out, the height was 86 on average. Last up, we had the max HL in the 45 stiff, which I think was a really interesting profile. This one I was 91.3, which was actually very similar club head speed to what I got out of my own 50 stiff. Obviously only 5 grams difference, but I thought I'd maybe get a little bit faster. And from that, I hit 135.5 ball speed, 2426 spin, which is pretty optimal and where I'd want it to sit, 219.6 in terms of carry. So that was my longest average by 3 yards. I also had my longest shot with this at 224 and another at 223. And my height was at 80 feet, even with one that I didn't quite catch that went down 70. And if we took that out, it was 83 feet average. I think this one could be really optimal for me. I'd be really interested to try it out when the weather warms up and see if having that extra height when the air's a little bit warmer gives me even more distance. Hopefully this has been really interesting for you and has shown you how much the shaft can have an impact on your shots, and it's not always just about picking the right driver model when it comes to kind of improving your performance off the tee. There's definitely a few key takeaways for me. One is definitely in terms of what flex you're using. You could see how my ball flight moved from left to right with different flexes. I think that's definitely something people could play with more in terms of changing the shot shape if they want to, and also just something that shows people that sometimes moving away from a stiff flex is okay if you're trying to bring a ball away from the right. It was definitely interesting how the weight and also kind of the shaft profile changed my height a lot, and I think a lot of people could explore changing around different shafts and seeing how that affects the height and the total carry of your shots, because I think a lot of people are missing out on gaining more maximum carry distance from getting the ball hanging in the air longer. I was actually really surprised by the Max HL shaft. I think it's definitely something I wouldn't have thought to try for myself, but actually I think that 45 stiff could be a really good option. It's producing really good numbers for me. It's producing some really good numbers for me so far, almost identical to the TD50, but actually giving me a little bit extra boost of height that I think I need. Let me know in the comments which one you think you should test, or if there's anything else you want to know about shafts, and hopefully I can come back and help you with that.